1. This happened to me some years ago when I worked in the call center of a Midwestern bank. I was working as an online banking support technician, essentially phone-based tech support. The job was pitched to me as a non-customer-facing technical role. But barely a week after I started, we were told that we were technically within the call center's chain of command, and thus we had to start taking calls. Even though all of the service reps had access to the online banking system and were trained for basic troubleshooting, think password changes, unlocking locked accounts, etc. Well, cue the transferred calls. I'd pick up the phone and the rep would say something akin to, "I have a customer who needs online banking assistance," then quickly transfer the call before I could ask for specifics. The customer would only need their password reset and would be upset that they had to be transferred and take it out on me. I have to say, there is a large number of people who should never use a computer again, but you didn't come here for this part. On to the part you came for. So one day I was working the Saturday shift. The call center was run with a skeleton crew, and our team was just one person on weekends. Mid-May through my shift, the call center's assistant manager came into our area. This manager had a reputation for being a complete bitch, especially to people she didn't like. She played favorites pretty badly, and I was in her sights. We'll call her Karen because why not? "Hey, I need you to add this account to a customer's profile," and she hands me a paper. I pull up the account she specified as well as the online profile, and I see that the account and profile belong to a business account. This is a red flag, because business accounts have very specific rules to follow. One of which is that a form needs to be filled out and signed by one of the authorized signatories for that business. This is because many businesses have employee users who are able to view account details or transfer funds within accounts, but are not authorized to modify the accounts or profiles on behalf of the businesses. Think people in accounting or billing. "Sure, do you have a signed business form or is one in the works?" "No, I just need you to add the account. The customer is on the phone." "We can't add an account to a business without a signed form. I'm authorizing it. Do it on my authority." Knowing she'll hang me out to dry, okay, just send an email authorizing the change and I'll add the account. "I need the account added now. You're keeping the customer waiting." "Karen, I'll start setting it up, but even so it will take about 5 minutes. Just send me a quick email authorizing the change, and we'll do it in lieu of the form. Just put in who you spoke to and what they want you to do." Karen leaves without another word, and a few minutes later, an email arrives. I save the changes and the job is done, or so I thought. On Monday morning, I was working at my desk when my supervisor came over. She asks me to follow her to the conference room, where she shut the door. Her name is Becky. "OP, Karen told me she had an incident with you on Saturday. Is this true?" "We had a discussion, but I would hardly call it an incident. She asked me to add a business account without a form, which is a procedure violation. She said that you were insubordinate and combative." "Sorry, what?" "All I did was tell her that we needed the form or an email from her authorizing the break in procedure. I was neither combative or insubordinate." "Well, it's your word against hers, and she is a manager, so I need to believe what she has told me." "Seriously? I have the email from her in my box where we broke procedure. Still, when a manager gives you an order, you obey it. You do not question it." "And when the spot audit finds that I added a business account without a signed form?" "It doesn't matter, you follow orders. Consider this a verbal warning, and if your insubordination continues, it will result in further penalty." A few months later, I received my annual review. The incident was noted in the review, and my overall rating had been downgraded. We used a 4-level system, A being the best and D being the worst, from B to a C, on the basis of my insubordination. This had the direct effect of reducing my raise to a negligible amount, no annual bonus and no promotion. I left the job for a new technical role a year later. I later found out Karen was fired for creating a hostile work environment. Thank you, HR, you finally made a good call. And Becky was asked to step down from her supervisory role due to poor performance. She walked off the job that day. 2. In my original post, I talked about my entitled roommate Brandy. The gist of that story is how she completely screwed me over with the Wi-Fi bill. giving me the password to our neighbor's Wi-Fi across the hall, and still charging for the Wi-Fi in our apartment. When I confronted her about it, she denied everything and told me she didn't owe me a cent. So Brandy and I continued living with each other for the next several months. We remained cordial to one another and mostly stayed out of each other's way. This was relatively easy, since the last few months I lived there, she practically lived at her boyfriend's apartment, down the hill from where our apartment building was. So, during the pandemic, I started struggling with the loneliness that comes with social distancing. I was really depressed, and one of the main things keeping me going on days I felt especially lonely was the cat that my roommate had. I've had animals pretty much my whole life, and their company can really fill that empty space for companionship that I need. However, as Brandy started spending more time at her boyfriend's apartment, she started taking the cat with her. Those days were hard, however, because it was her cat and not mine, I never asked her to leave him with me, even though I was really struggling. So I started thinking about getting a cat for myself. I've introduced cats into new spaces and social situations several times before, so I felt confident that I could do that here. I could do it over for a while because I didn't want to get a new cat only to start going back to work and leave it alone 90% of the time. I wanted to make sure I was ready for the lifelong commitment that comes with having a pet. So anyways, I decided to get a cat. I approached Brandy to talk it over with her. At first she seemed open to the prospect, but then suddenly she wasn't. She told me no as if I were a child asking a parent for something. I was so frustrated because I owned the apartment just as much as she did, and had always been more than considerate with her. I approached her to discuss it one more time, and she started telling me how she didn't want another animal in her apartment because her cat already lived there. Here are the reasons she gave. Cats can't share litter boxes, so that's going to be an issue. Anyone who owns cats knows that they can and do all the time. Well, it's going to scratch up my couch and rug. Her own cat already did that frequently, and she had to put protective covers on the couch for that reason. I explained that I would be happy to meet her halfway. I'll pay for better quality couch covers than the ones she already had, and replace the rug with a different one, if she was that concerned about it. Finally, her Hail Mary attempt was, well, the day you bring another cat into this apartment, I'm going to put my couch in storage, and you'll have to put something else there if you want to sit in the living room. I calmly explained that I didn't move in with her for the couch. I moved in for a place to live. I told her I'd be fine coming up with an alternative solution for the couch. However, at this point I was not asking her, I was telling her. She was not happy with this and accused me of holding back and telling her I was getting a cat until we renewed our lease. I explained that I had not decided to get a cat until my job announced that we would all be working from home for at least another 6 months, which was several weeks after we'd renewed our lease. I also told her that even though I wanted to adopt an older cat or bonded pair, I felt it would be easier just to get one kitten, because kittens are usually easier to introduce to new environments and new cats. I was trying my best to compromise with her. She finally gave in and accepted that I was getting a cat. Surprise, surprise. She did not remove the couch despite her threats. When I finally found a kitten to take home, I let Brandy know when I'd be taking her home so she would know. I gave her the plan I was following from an online pet journal so she would know how this was going to go. The day arrived and I brought my new kitten home. I brought the kitten into my room, which was ready with toys, food, and a new scratching pad. I left her in there to curiously explore with my boyfriend supervising. Brandy asked when her cat and mine were going to meet. I reiterated we weren't meeting that day because my kitten needed a few days to acclimate to the room and recognize it as her safe space. My roommate basically blew a fuse and started yelling at me that I wasted her time and that I should have explained that. I reminded her that I did explain in my text messages and that I sent her the plan I was going to follow so she could see it for herself. She said, "I'm not going to read all of that text. That's like a novel." It wasn't. It was a few paragraphs tops. I told her it was her own fault for not reading it and that I had done everything I could to prepare her. We had also had a few in-person conversations about it, but apparently she didn't remember those either. She then started yelling at me about how I was a terrible roommate and how all I did was lock myself in my room with my boyfriend all the time, and now I'm just going to do that with the kitten, too. She then started complaining about other things I was doing that upset her. She accused me of never cleaning around the apartment. I cleaned my own bathroom, bedroom, and cleaned up after myself in the kitchen. I reminded her that I offered to work on some sort of cleaning schedule with her when I first moved in. However, she had told me that she had a certain way she liked things, and that she would just do it all herself. I continually checked in with her while I lived there, but she kept saying not to worry about it. Now all of a sudden it was an issue. She then grabbed our full bin of recyclables, picking things out that were mine, and started throwing them on the floor, telling me I never emptied the recyclables I did, and how I left so much stuff in there and sometimes that she'd have to make multiple trips to the dumpster to empty it. I am likely in the wrong for this next comment, but here goes. I told her I never complained when I had to make multiple trips because of how much alcohol she drank every week, and that I didn't exactly enjoy living with an alcoholic roommate. She had often filled the recycling bin by the end of the week, all on her own with just bottles of beer and wine. That did it, she screamed. I want you out of my apartment. I reminded her that I lived there too, and she couldn't just kick me out. I told her she treated me like a house guest, not a roommate. We yelled back and forth some more before she finally left the apartment and I went back to my room. I burst into tears and my boyfriend comforted me. I no longer felt safe or responsible having a new kitten in the apartment. And to be honest, I wasn't sure if Brandy could kick me out or not. I had never co-signed a lease with someone before. I thought about it all and talked it over with my boyfriend for the next several hours. His apartment didn't allow animals, so that was a non-starter, and ended up taking the kitten back to the home we had gotten her from. I cried the whole way there. I said goodbye and gave them the pet carrier I had bought to transport her in, so she'd have something familiar to go home in when someone else took her home. I cried for the next few days. She was such a sweet kitten, and I wish I'd gotten to know her, but I'm sure she ended up in a much better living situation. I installed a doorknob with a lock and key in my door that weekend, and was the only person with a key. I no longer felt safe in my apartment unless my door was locked. I spent almost all my time in my bedroom when I wasn't working at the desk in the public space in our dining or living room area. If she was in the apartment, I was usually at my boyfriend's place. Finally, I called the apartment complex and asked if Brandy was actually able to remove me from the lease like she had threatened. They confirmed that we co-leased together, meaning that neither could kick the other one out. So, at least I still had a place to live. She started being more cold and passive-aggressive. Her next thing was demanding I pay for my half of the security deposit. When I moved in, I immediately asked what my half was, and she said, I'm probably not getting the security deposit back for this place, so don't worry about it. Now she was insisting. I told her I would only give it to our apartment complex because I didn't trust her not to keep the money out of spite, especially considering how she'd handled the issue with the Wi-Fi. She kept insisting that I pay her, but I held my ground and eventually she gave up. I wasn't destructive when I lived there. If anything, her cat was more likely to destroy something. He'd frequently eaten any food I'd left unsupervised for less than 10 minutes. Once he took the thick plastic cover off a rotisserie chicken that was supposed to last me a week because he wanted it, torn lampshades, and had even torn down a canopy I had installed over my bed twice. She never reimbursed me for any of the damage he did to my property, saying, I told you I was getting a cat when you moved in. It's your responsibility. You knew this might happen. Yeah, she was a real peach. Finally, I found out that since I was only a co-lease, I could leave whenever without being penalized for it financially from the apartment complex. My boyfriend asked if I would get an apartment with him, and I agreed. We started looking for places and eventually found somewhere with decent space for the two of us. The first apartment we wanted wasn't ready until the second week of the following month, though, so we went to a better option that compromised for everyone. There was another unit that was available the third week of the month we were in, meaning I would be leaving earlier than expected. However, it would be easier for Brandy, who was already planning on moving her boyfriend in that same week. I decided not to ask for reimbursement for the fourth week of rent because I figured that would be petty. Despite everything that happened, I just wanted to leave as peacefully as possible, and put the whole thing behind me. We got approved for the apartment and began making plans to move. However, do you think it was that easy? No, of course not. Brandy was a menace to live with. The last month I lived there was during a heat wave, and the air conditioning worked well in the rest of the apartment, but not in my room. Maintenance came over multiple times and kept telling me it was fine, but I really couldn't cool down my room without keeping the AC on high. This was absolutely my fault, and I ran up the gas bill very high that month, like 2 times what we normally spent. Brandy sent me a text with the bill and was furious. I apologized and took full responsibility. However, she said that because she had spent most of the past month at her boyfriend's apartment, I should pay the full bill. I lost it. I put up with this woman's temper tantrums for a full year and was not about to pay 4 times what I normally paid, simply because she was acting like a Karen demanding a free 4-course meal because her dish wasn't hot enough. I finally put my foot down and told her no. I told her I would gladly pay for the difference in cost. She'd pay what she would normally pay, and I pay what I would normally pay, plus the amount that was over the usual balance. However, she didn't get a free pass on utilities simply because she decided to live at her boyfriend's for a month. What next? I pay the full rent on the apartment? She told me that I was being unreasonable, and that the day I moved out, she would send me one final itemized payment request on Venmo for the full amount of the gas bill, plus other utilities, and the cost of rent. I shot back with, "Okay, since we're penny pinching, if you do that, I will send you back the amount you requested, minus the 4 months Wi-Fi you wrongfully charged me and never paid back, and the last week of rent. I won't be living in the apartment, and I will itemize it so you can see everything." She did not take that well. She told me that was unnecessary, and I added I'd picked an early week to accommodate her boyfriend's move-in date. If she was going to be petty about the whole thing, so was I. We didn't speak. Even the day I moved, we and some friends packed everything up, stuck it in the truck, and were moved into our new place by nightfall. The next morning, I received the fated invoice request from Brandy and breathed a sigh of relief. She requested only half of every utility, including the gas bill, and then deducted the cost of the Wi-Fi and my last week of rent. I finally had a win. There is one more little happy ending here. A few weeks prior to the move, a friend got in touch with a lady who ran a shelter from her home for feral cats and kittens. I offered to donate the toys and food I had bought for the kitten I had originally brought home because it made me so sad to look at them. I ended up donating some extra litter and food as well because I just really love cats. When I went to drop them off, she introduced me to a feral mom cat who had just gotten a litter of kittens. She offered to let me meet them, and I said yes. She put the runt of the litter, a tiny little tortoise shell, in my arms, who proceeded to crawl up my arm and play in my hair. I was in love instantly. 2 months later, my boyfriend and I brought the tortoise shell kitten and her brother, who has been on and off my lap while I type this out, to their forever home, with us at our new apartment. We've been spoiling them with non-stop love and affection ever since. My boyfriend and I are so happy together in our new home. He kind of saved me by suggesting we move in together, but I couldn't be more grateful. I love him, our cats, and my life so much now. It was honestly kind of emotional writing this whole thing out. It was sort of a traumatic experience, but I'm so happy where my life is right now. I haven't spoken to Brandy since I moved out, and honestly, I don't care to. I hope for her sake she's well and that she grew the fuck up because, dear God almighty, she needs to grow up. 3. I'm a 19-year-old female and I had a roommate the same age. She had severe depression as well as some anxiety. Due to this, several things she did were annoying. I will not be including these as I do not support mocking people due to mental illness. However, some things were absolutely not related to her mental state. First off, the lights in our dorm had to be off and the shades had to be closed at all times. She attributed this to her astigmatism. However, she would also complain that the dorm looked like a cave, which it did because it was dark. We had met at orientation and got along because we seemed to have lots in common. I would later realize she lied about her interests so I would like her and agree to be her roommate. She agreed with me that she liked hiking, but it turns out she didn't ever want to leave the dorm. She reveled in the fact that she was hikikomori. Her words, not mine. For those who don't know, hikikomori is a Japanese term for a person who never leaves their home. She also lied about liking taking care of plants. The university gave out free succulents, and she basically gave hers to me and admitted she had no idea how to care for it. She expected me to pay for everything. I don't drink coffee, but she was addicted to it. She asked me to buy her a Keurig and got angry when I told her she would pay for it, since I would never use it. She expected me to move my car closer to the dorm so she wouldn't have to walk as far to get to it. It was a 4-minute walk. I explained I was a nervous driver, and the closer parking lot was a death trap, but she would still ask every time. In addition, she would randomly ask to go to the store and would get angry if I was not willing to take her right at that moment. She would call in prescriptions and then tell me afterwards that she needed to get to the store right away. If I was studying or didn't want to go, she would guilt-trip me. If it was really urgent, she could just have taken the school's free shuttle. Anything I bought was fair game for her. The town where I go to college is known for one specific type of food. I won't say what, since it would instantly give away where I am. Naturally, I got some of said food. Before I'd even taken it out of the bag, my roommate grabbed herself a generous portion, over half, and began eating. On other occasions, she would wait for me to go to class and then eat the last of food without telling me. She would only admit it after I openly asked her. While I tried to be respectful of her sleep, she was never respectful of mine. She would play Genshin Impact with the sound on at full brightness at odd hours of the night. She would narrate her gameplay while I was sleeping, and pretend not to hear me when I asked her to quiet down. Luckily, she dropped out, and I get to live in a solo dorm. 4. It was during the month of April. Me and my family had gone to this resort near the beachside. Now, the way the resort worked was that it was split into various buildings. Building 1200, 1100, and 1000. The rooms in Building 1000 were much more luxurious and expensive, being larger and nearer the sea, while the rooms in Building 1200 were much more affordable, but smaller as well. My family booked a room somewhere around 1100, which wasn't too shabby. It had access to a small river-like pool leading to the main public pool. So one day we decided to go for a swim, and made our way to the public pool. After a while of swimming, we decided to make our way back via the pool back to our room. So we brought our towels and accessories like water guns and goggles, and made our way slowly towards our room. Unfortunately, midway through I cut my leg on a decorative rock they had in the pool, and my leg started to bleed and ache like crazy. So my mom decided to help me to our room since I had difficulty doing so. She left our towels and other items on the beach chairs just at the edge of the pool, so she wouldn't have to carry them at the same time before bringing me back to the room. Now, I wasn't present for the rest of the story, since I was in the hotel room, but based off my mom's retelling of it, this is what happened. My mom made her way back to the spot she had placed our items, only to find our belongings dumped on the ground, and sitting on the chairs were our suspects. One older man, our entitled parent, and a teenager or young adult next to him, around 18 years old and presumably his son. So my mom decided to confront them, and an argument developed within seconds. "Excuse me, why are you sitting here, and why have our belongings been dumped on the ground?" "They were taking up the seat. Please leave this as private property." It's important to note, neither the chair nor the area it was taking up were private property. There was a footpath behind them which broke off the path to lead to a room, which was presumably theirs. But the footpath itself was still for anyone to use, let alone the chairs. "This is not private property. Why did you dump our belongings?" "This is private property. Leave." "This is not private property, and if you don't answer me, I will contact the hotel staff." The man still continues on insisting this is private property, their tone getting more aggressive as time went on. My mom decided it wasn't worth the effort to fight back, so she snatched up our belongings and left for our room. When she came back, she hung up the towels and went to dry off our accessories, water guns, goggles, etc. But then she realized that the goggles we had brought, one green and black and the other blue and white for her and me respectively, were missing. So she decided to make her way back and recount her steps in hopes she just dropped them on the way unknowingly. Eventually, she made her way to the beach chairs, where the entitled father and son were sitting down, and continued searching. "This is private property. Leave now." "I'm looking for something. Have you seen any goggles around here?" "No, we have not. Go. This is private property." Another additional thing, the son apparently seemed to hate the father, looking away when he was spitting out the nonsense about private property, and just seeming very embarrassed in general. My mom was irritated and decided to leave frustrated, deciding it was easier to make a complaint to the resort staff. She made her way to the lobby and asked one of them to tell the father that the seats he was claiming were his were in fact public property, and to also help find the lost goggles. The staff seemed very unconcerned, however, telling her that they would do it despite immediately going back to their other tasks and paying no mind. So she decided to speak to the manager, who she actually knew for quite a while, since she would often have to discuss business dealings with them to represent their place of work. So the manager came out, a tall man, and my mom told him the story. The resort manager followed her to the seats and told the father to stop insisting the property was his, since it clearly was not. The man, seeing he had no chance of winning this, made his way back to his room while grumbling angrily. While they were finally put in their place, my mom still hadn't found the goggles. However, when the son trailed behind his dad back to the room, my mom noticed he was carrying a small cloth bag that, among other things, swinging caps, sunblock, etc., also had 2 goggles identical to ours inside. So she knocked on the doors of the room, resort manager behind her, and when an entitled parent opened, confronted him. "Why do you have our goggles?" "I don't know what you mean. I didn't take anything." "That bag," pointing at the cloth bag sitting on the bed behind them, "it has our goggles." "I don't know what you mean. Stop accusing me." "If you do not show us the bag, I will have to make a missing items report." The EP grumbled, hesitantly walking towards the bag. He left the door open enough for my mom and the resort manager to walk in. They surrounded the bag, and lo and behold, the goggles she was looking for were sitting comfortably at the top of the bag. The mom grabbed our goggles, her blood practically boiling at the attempted theft of her things. The goggles weren't cheap either. They were relatively pricey for goggles. The resort manager was frowning and threatening to make a police report. The entitled parent, of course, begged him not to, spewing some nonsense about finding it on the ground and taking it because no one claimed it, which is still illegal and a horrible excuse. However, I think the resort manager didn't want to go through the hassle of submitting a police report, so he and my mom made their way out of the room. And that's where my story ends. Our goggles were safely returned, and we made our way back home once the holiday was over. It kinda hurts knowing EP was more than happy to steal in front of his son, and how much he seemed to think the world revolved around him. But in the end, it did make for a good story. 5. Okay, so I had completely forgotten this had occurred until I was reading posts on Reddit. I'm going to provide very specific details about locations, etc. because 1, I don't live anywhere near the location now, and 2, I think it will be interesting to see if anyone else has had experience with this nut and or witnessed this happen. I and my wife live in Ballantyne in the south end of Charlotte from 2018 to 2020. We rented an apartment very near to Harris Teeter grocery store, as in walking distance. There is a public road that goes past the side of HT into the complex. This is a normal public street with no parking signs. Because it's a secondary street, it's honestly not very wide, narrow enough that when people parked on the side, you have to move over as you drive past. Now, since this is a little residential street heading into an apartment complex, it doesn't have massive traffic. Somebody in the overall neighborhood decided that despite the fact parking was allowed, they simply were not accepting that. So they started vandalizing vehicles in a minor manner. Soap and shaving cream. Car wash correctable vandalism, but still a pain in the ass to deal with. So one day, I get to meet this Ken in person. Although we had both saw each other previously, we'd never spoke. Ken pulls up beside me and honks. I roll down my window and say hi. He's not polite. I inform him after his little rant that 1, I'm parked legally, and 2, I'm not moving. This is far more satisfying for him, so he lays on his horn. And continues to lay on it. Minutes are going by, customers are looking. Cart kid from the lot finally goes to get the manager. Ken is still laying on his horn when the HT manager comes to my window and apologizes. And then actually thanks me, because this in-person nonsense has finally allowed them to identify the vandalizer and get charges pressed. The entire conversation with me occurs while Ken continues to lay on his horn. He only gives up when this 6'4" mountain of a man walks over to his car and informs him that he has already phoned the police, and he can stay to speak with them or have them chase him down based on his plate number. Ken chose the latter, and the honking stopped. My wife came out of HT just as the honking stopped and was completely oblivious to the entire thing. Ken was lucky I was properly medicated at the time. There are times in my life where his behavior would have gotten him hospitalized and myself arrested. I'm happy I've grown. Hopefully Ken does too. Ha! Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 105. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please bang the like button before you go, thank you kindly. Alright, let's see. No other business, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... And this one is thanks to Kathy Beckford. Thank you, Kathy. What hobby would you do if you could be instantly good at it? Well, that's quite easy for me. I already play the guitar a little bit, but I don't play it anywhere near as much as I'd like to, because I'm not as good at it as I want to, and I guess I don't have the patience, or I'm just too distracted by so many other things to sit down and actually spend the proper time to learn it. But I do play a little bit, and I enjoy it. So every now and again, I will pick it up, dust off the guitar, literally, change the strings or tune it up. Usually it's been a while, so I'll buy a fresh set of strings and give it a little TLC. It's my father's acoustic guitar, so it is important to me. So I do like to, play it every now and again. But if I could be instantly good, like a master guitarist, I could play anything in any style, that's what I would want to do. I would be very, very happy about that. And what would you like to do if you could just be instantly good at it? Please leave your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.